Hello and welcome to Just One More Watch. I've got a question for you. Now you can either leave me a comment or just shout the answer at your screen and I'll give you 5 seconds to think about it. What watch brand makes the best dials for under $500 US? Yes, you're right, it's Seiko. I reckon about 80% of you just shouted Seiko at your devices. I have looked at so many dials from their Presage dress watch line that have just been stunning, but they also do amazing dials on their dive watches as well. The detail is incredible considering their relatively modest price tags. But is that position as the best affordable dial maker under threat? Have Citizen now taken over that mantle? Last year I gave the inaugural Dial of the Year award to a Citizen. Gary from Birmingham's beautiful JDM Citizen with the colour changing dial. And today on my wrist and crucially under my macro lens, I have a limited edition Citizen that is clearly trying to give Seiko a run for their money. Is Citizen now better than Seiko at making affordable dials? That is what we're here to find out. Now, you saw the pop-up. Big thank you to Watch Direct, who are my local watch retailer here in Sydney. Literally, they are 2 suburbs away from me. They supplied the Citizen for review. I do not have to give it back once I'm done. As I said, this is a limited edition, less than 2,000 pieces worldwide, and they currently have it on sale for less than 500 Australian dollars. That comes in at 325 US dollars. That is a great price for a genuine limited edition. I will of course leave a link to their website in the description of the video. Make sure you tell them I sent you. Now, we're not just going to look at this watch in isolation today. I'm going to compare it directly to the last Seiko I bought with a beautiful dial, my Presage Irish Coffee. Who's your money on, the champ or the contender? Let's flip the camera and get on with it. Alright, let's start appropriately enough at the beginning. Now, this is a slightly smaller box than I've been used to with recent Citizens. Not a complaint, just an observation. In fact, anything that frees up more cupboard space for more watches gets a thumbs up from me. Still contains the all-important cushion and the all-important watch on the cushion. And a couple of other all-important details that we should not gloss over at this stage are the 5-year warranty that you get if you buy it in Australia from an authorised dealer. Watch Direct are an authorised dealer, so you get a full 5-year warranty. One other thing is that this uses a Miyota 8310. Now, obviously a member of the 8000 series of movements, but this one features a 60-hour power reserve rather than 40, not to be sniffed at. Now, this Kuroshio 64 pays homage to Citizen's Parawater watch of 1959. That was the first water-resistant watch Citizen ever made, rated to a depth of 50 meters, using various O-rings and stuff that we now all take for granted. Kuroshio 64 refers specifically to some testing that was done in 1964 in a stretch of water known as Kuroshio, black water. The watch was dragged along underneath a wooden buoy apparently. And the contemporary watch not only has similar vintage looks to the original, but also has the same water resistance rating of 50 meters. Cool story, bro, but what we're really interested here today is the dial, right? And it has one of those organic style dial patterns, a bit like feathers if you look at them closely. And I say organic because it doesn't look like a man-made pattern. It looks like a natural formation, so you get variation in size and depth and thickness and angle of the grooves across the surface of the dial. Now, on top of that dial sit rather elegant Arrowhead indices and an applied Citizen logo. The indices are particularly nice, multifaceted with 3 high-polished edges, leading to a flat brushed top surface. One modern touch not featured on the original though is the addition of loom plots set within a minute track just beyond those applied arrowheads. There will of course be a loom video coming up shortly. The hands however are just like the original with Dauphine hour and minute hands and a simple unloomed needle second hand. There is a frame around the date complication at the 3 o'clock and the 3 o'clock arrowhead has been slightly clipped so as not to foul the frame. Dial text is refreshingly simple, far more simple in fact than the original watch, just an applied Citizen brand name beneath the double arrow at 12, and automatic in a pleasant italic script above the single arrowhead at 6. So what are your initial impressions of the dial? What are you thinking so far? I think it looks better from some angles than from others. There isn't a huge amount of depth to the grooves, so much so that the dial can look quite flat from a frontal shot like this, but if you get an angle and the light catches it, you can definitely see there is a lot more going on. But it perhaps doesn't have the wow factor of a cocktail time. It's not quite as in your face as they tend to be. Now, whether that's a negative or a positive, I guess that's up to you, the individual. Let's leave the dial for now, but I will come back to it later. Let's do dimensions. Vintage looks, but contemporary sizing. 40.8mm in diameter, 12.8mm thick, with a lug to lug of 48.8mm. 20mm between the lugs, thank goodness, because Citizen are well known for throwing in the odd 21. Sized up for my 7-inch wrist on the supply bracelet, it weighs in at 120 grams on the nose, so it's large-ish but not heavy-ish. Now for your 479 Aussie, you're not getting sapphire, you are instead getting domed mineral crystal. We've already talked about the 50 meters of water resistance, radical perhaps in 1964, not quite so radical today, and the movement as discussed is a Miyota 8310A. So not only does it have the extended power reserve, I would imagine through a larger mainspring, but it's one of Miyota's premium 8000 series movements, so there is a fair degree of fairly basic decoration and a skeletonized rotor. Of course, Citizen own Miyota, so this is technically an in-house movement. It's not a bad looking movement, there's certainly more here to look at than a Seiko 4R for example, but do bear in mind that rotor only spins in one direction, which occasionally can be heard and also felt. But I do like the fact that they have taken a bit of extra time with the case back itself. There's an individual limited edition, this is number 1818 of 1959, and the model name, the Kuroshio 64, is etched in there also. The case is well finished, it's such a retro profile, isn't it, with that big piece of domed crystal aping the acrylic crystal of the 50s and 60s, that fixed bezel, a thin mid case and the angled lugs. Now there's a vertical brush on the mid case and a horizontal brush on the upper lug surfaces. The bezel's high polish, as is the case back. 6.5mm crown provides enough grip to be usable on the occasions when you do let the power reserve run down and you have to give it a wind and set it once more. But you know you're dealing with an affordable Japanese watch when you get to the bracelet because it has all the hallmarks of a bracelet on an affordable Japanese watch. At least the end links are solid, as are the links themselves, but it's a pin and collar system, so beloved of the Japanese, holding things together. The upper surfaces to the links are mostly brushed, but there is a touch of high polish in the mid link, which is appropriate given the mixed finish of the watch head. There's a little bit of flex, but not enough to cause rattling, but the clasp is one of those all too familiar cheapo daily wear style clasps. Pressed upper, pressed lower, thin and flaky, with not nearly enough micro adjust holes, meaning you are rather forced to wear this one loose. Which is exactly how I have been wearing it, and it's still comfortable enough because it's not particularly heavy, and there's a high polish finish to the crown, meaning it's not doing any damage to the back of your hand if it is rolling up and down the wrist. 12.8 may seem a bit thick, but when I roll my wrist, you can see that a chunk of that comes from the heavily domed crystal, and actually sits rather nicely on the wrist, helping it feel a bit slimmer. Not a huge amount of weight in the bracelet though, particularly the clasp, so it is a bit top heavy, exacerbated by the fact that you are wearing it loose because of the lack of adjustment and the lack of half links. Now the sizing of these at between 40 and 41 very much mimics the sizing of a lot of these slightly older cocktail time range. The newer Seikos seem to have gone sub 40, but the older ones were still just north of 40 like the Citizen. It still wears very well on me, but the smaller wristed might start to get into a bit of trouble because of that 48.8 lug to lug. That's the pocket shot. It may be loosely based on a watch from the 1950s, but it actually looks quite modern. Perhaps this blue colour helps. Maybe if I had got the cream one, I would have thought differently. Alright, let's get the moans out of the way before we go back to the dial and compare it to its arch rival and a couple of other watches with similar dials. I haven't shown you the lume yet. That's usually a sign that the lume isn't up to much. Look, it's okay considering this is a vintage inspired everyday watch, but there is no double dot at 12, so you're never going to be 100% convinced on the alignment of the watch after dark, and when I turn the speed up, you can see that those lume dots soon start to fade, leaving only a fairly small set of hands. It's okay, but it's not amazing. Which is how I would describe the bracelet. Okay, but not amazing. No half links. And the clasp is the weak point really. If it was a bit larger it would offer a better fit and more balance to the head of the watch, but it seems that every Japanese brand thinks that this is the optimal clasp for this style of watch. Unfortunately, I disagree with them. And the finish on the edges of the hour and the minute hand is a little bit rough, particularly under macro. Look, it's not so rough that it's going to offend you at arm's length, but definitely something you'll notice occasionally if you live with one of these long term. But back to the dial. It's very attractive from some angles, but a bit nondescript frankly from others. There isn't a huge amount of depth to those grooves, so they can end up looking flat, which is, I'm sure, not the point today. Now, I've seen this organic feather-like style before, as I'm sure you have, on several micros, including this Straton. And frankly, I think it looks better on this Straton because the patterning looks more organic and more pronounced. And when I bring in my Irish coffee cocktail time, it just takes the dial to a whole different level than the Citizen. The brand logo is taller, it catches the light better. The dial pattern, subtle in some circumstances, is far more intricate and far more delicate under other light situations. It therefore manages to be spectacular in a way that the Citizen just can't quite compete with. So I'll give the Citizen a B- for the dial today. They're definitely trying, and there's definitely potential in this style of patterning, but it just isn't convincing as other watches that I've seen try to do the same thing, and definitely not as convincing as Seiko's attempt to make a spectacular dial on an affordable watch. Overall, the Kuroshio still has plenty of appeal as a daily wear watch though. It's wearable and comfortable if you like this slightly larger size, and it has enough water resistance and a bit of lume to add extra practicality. Plus, it's very fairly priced if you pick up one of these limited editions brand new with a 5-year warranty for under 500 Aussie. But Seiko has been making cocktail times for over a decade, and Citizen are going to have to work pretty hard to catch them up, I think. So there you have it. Citizen are definitely trying new and interesting things with their dials, and you cannot argue with the value for money offered by this one. A genuine small batch limited edition daily wear piece from a big Japanese brand for just over $300 US. But do they now make the best dials in the business? No, not on this evidence anyway. Better luck next time, Citizen. I look forward to seeing what you do in the future. While you're here, why not check out Gary's gorgeous JDM Citizen from last year or the Seiko Irish Coffee from earlier on this year. Thanks for watching all the way to the end. I hope to see you again in the future.